All right, ladies and gentlemen, if we could just take a little seat. Nick and I are ready to kick things off. You know, as an industry association, we constantly work with Brett's team, Nick's team. We thought it was an opportunity just to give a bit of a stock take about where the response was today to some of the resellers, interested industry parties and things like that. And look, I think the fact that we've got a lighter crowd today, and we probably will at the market, says to me things are pretty calm about where things are going. A lot of the growers are moving their produce, which was our concern. But I guess, Nick's got a lot of knowledge about the response and the deed and how things are working and the interplay between states and some of those issues. So just an opportunity today to hear from Nick, and we will have a Q&A, and I'll mention that Fontella and Purser have arranged a translator for anyone who needs that later today. But now I hand over to Nick, who's our Chief Plant Health Biosecurity Officer, and I have on speed dial, so I'll hand it to you, mate.
We've got a pretty small group, so I will go through a presentation, and I'll do that fairly quickly because it starts at the beginning, and I'll try and skip over the stuff that I think most people have heard, but it needs to be told in order. So I'll go through that fairly quickly, and because we've got such a small group, then please, we'll have some questions and comments afterwards, and there's plenty of time for that. So bear with me, and I'll try and get this one moving because that's up on the side. I'm not sure if this is going to work, but let's just try. Look at that. So, as I said, a couple of slides of background first. So August 2024, the 5th of August was when this response started, and at that stage we had an unconfirmed report of the disease on a property, and very quickly followed up on that one to find 2 more subsequent properties in South Australia. So by the end of August we had 3 infected properties with this disease that were all connected through known movements of material. And the good news is that we still have in South Australia those 3 infected properties. We've done a lot of work, which I'll go through in a minute, and not found any more of the disease off of those 3 properties. Quickly in August as well, the national arrangements kicked in. I'm sure most people have heard about that. So there's a National Emergency Plant Pest Response Deed, which we enact whenever we have an exotic disease like this come in. So every state, the Commonwealth Government, and also the affected industries nationally meet and decide what we should do. And the 3 things that they work on is, first of all, is it a pest? Yeah, this one is. This is on the list. This is one that we would respond to. Is it technically feasible to eradicate? And we've decided that it is. Given what we know, it can be eradicated. And then is it cost beneficial? If we do eradicate it, is it in the nation's interest to do that? And it's a yes to that as well. So nationally, those decisions have been made under the deed with all the states and industries around the table. Because it's in South Australia, we then lead the response. And I'll get to Victoria in a minute. All of that was tied up into a national response plan, which was signed off at the end of November. At the time, that seemed to take quite a long time to get up. But looking back, it was less than 4 months from day one until we had a response plan in place. And I've seen some of these take over 12 months. So it was good to have a national plan in place by the end of November, because that's given us a pathway through this. We know now how an infected property can treat product, decontaminate glass houses, replant crops and get them tested. So that's a really important step to get that national plan up and agreed, and we're working under it now. So again, we've got those 3 properties that I spoke about. This one here I'll go into in a minute. So on the 14th of January of this year, we had a property confirmed in Victoria. And unfortunately, that one is connected to one of our properties. We know that some seedlings were sent over to Victoria and they've since tested positive. And that's so why that one has been added to our list. We think it's obviously a very targeted movement. It's one we would have liked to have avoided, but we know where the disease came from in that case. It's been isolated, and we think that one can be eradicated as well. That didn't change that national view on being technically feasible to eradicate. We've spoken about the businesses that are affected here. I put this map up because there's a whole lot of dots to show where we are doing surveillance. So there's a lot of people that have had surveillance done that obviously don't have the disease. And for those that are in the room, you might see, if your eyes are good enough, a lot of these have MAP written on them. That's a market access property. The only reason the dot is on the screen is because we've sampled it so that property can then access Western Australia and Queensland. So we've now got, I think, over 60 properties that we've sampled, or 60 market access properties and the rest. Over 13,000 samples I'll put up in a minute. So we're forming a good set of evidence that shows this disease is isolated to those 3 properties. There's our summary test results. So as I said, 13,600, it was the latest count samples that we've now put through from South Australia. We've had the 59 detected, but they're across the 3 properties. So one property's got quite a few detected results, another a few less, and another one's only got the 1. So most of them are non-detected. We've always got these that some of them need resolution in the pipeline as well. So there's always a few that we're working on resampling or pending. So all that means for me, I think, is we can make a strong case that this disease is on 3 properties. And we'll continue to do that, particularly with Western Australia and Queensland, who I think now should really be looking hard at why they are regulating the rest of South Australia, because we've got a strong point of evidence that shows that we don't have the disease. Here's our results. So still the 3 infected properties. On those properties, we've got 8 glass houses, which hasn't changed either, that have the disease. We've got a few suspect premises, and these other classifications don't really matter. It just means that there's some glass houses on these properties that aren't growing tomatoes, and others that are what we call dangerous contact premises because they're next door. We've got a number of traces that we've cleared now interstate as well, mostly relating to seed movements. So market access sampling, as I said, we've now cleared 60 properties. So 60 properties are either doing business or clear for business with Western Australia and Queensland. So we have to certify produce, and that'll be our next step, is to try to get it to a point where growers can certify their own produce, but they're doing business. They're selling material to Western Australia and Queensland. The message we're trying to get out to everyone right now is we know the next wave of sampling is coming very soon, and we've been talking with everyone that we can around the need to just let us know. I've got to really stress that isn't a binding agreement. We don't need your full commitment that you will be sampling for Western Australia or Queensland. But if you think you might, if you think you might be sending to Queensland or Western Australia, please get in touch. There's an expression of intent form on the website. We'd really love you to fill that out. We'd like to know who you are so we can plan ahead and make sure this wave of sampling that's going to come, which we can predict a little bit better than last time, we'd like to know as much about it as we can. So if you're thinking about sending to Western Australia and Queensland in the next couple of months, that new crop will need to be sampled again. So every crop needs sampling once. We went through and did a whole lot in October, November, and that's held us through till now, but now we've got a new wave coming on. This new crop will need to be sampled again. So please let us know. We think we've got a bit of an idea of what to expect, but we'd love to know from you if you are potentially sending crop to Western Australia or Queensland, please. They all still need to be sampled. And it's important to say that of all those samples, so that represents 7,500 of that number that we said before, all not detected, which is great. As I was just saying, we know we've got another peak coming. It looks as though the peak that's about to come is not going to be quite as sharp or high as the one that we've been through before Christmas. So that's just what we're seeing so far. But we are preparing for it anyway, and by knowing what's coming, we can be ready for it. We've now got our own lab, which is well established, whereas last time, if you remember, it was the end of October. The Sardi lab came online, so it was already during the growing season, and also it was still bedding in its sampling at the time. It's now operating. It can do 160, 170 samples a day, and so that's great. We've got a couple of private labs which are close to being accredited to do this work as well, so they can take overflow from us. So we're confident that with the fact we know what's coming, we've got capacity, if we get a bit of a heads up and we know what's coming from the growers, that we can handle the sampling over March and April. I think, Josh, we've been in contact with all 60 growers to ask them what their intent is, so we've got a bit of an idea from those phone calls as well. Yeah, thank you. Okay, and it says there again that form, if you can fill it in, please, it's not a lock-in contract. We know things might change, and your markets, we understand can change from day to day, that's fine. But if you could find yourself in a position to sell to Queensland or Victoria, Queensland or Western Australia, we'd like to know now. Right, I'm going to repeat a couple of slides that we put up at our last meeting, but I'll go through them quickly because I want to talk about the National Response Plan so people know what's happening over the next 12 months. This is largely focused on the 3 sites that have the disease. This is how do you eradicate it? What have we agreed? The important bit is that, well, we'll go through here, the eradication will be achieved when all the infected crops are gone, all of the glass houses have been decontaminated, and we've replanted them and tested them as clean. That's pretty much it. The key thing I think about the response plan is that those businesses can return to trade once they've decontaminated and have a 2-week fallow. I'll put a picture up in a minute. They can return to trade and test while we are proving that the disease isn't here. So we can't release people from quarantine until 12 months, 12 months after the decontamination's finished, but they can grow crops, test them as clean, and sell fruit during that period. And that was a big step to get past nationally to understand that we could do that with confidence. The sampling regime gives us a 99% confidence at a very small incidence of disease. So we know we can pull the crops out, clean the glass house, and through testing, sell that fruit safely. So for those that like a picture, this one will be going up on our website soon, I think, Fontella. So this is something that will be available for people to see if they can't already. I'll just talk to it because pictures paint 1,000 words usually. These are the steps I was just talking about. Step 1, and this is on infected glass houses only, I have to say. Remember, this is only for those 3 properties that have the disease. It's about destroying the crop, disinfecting the crop. We have got what's called environmental swab testing in some places now, where you can go and swipe down a light switch or a place of contact and make sure the disease isn't there. So we do that as well. Must be at least 2 weeks without a disease, without a crop. So it has to lay fallow for 2 weeks, and then we replant. The 12 months proof of freedom is the green bar here, starts as soon as you finish decontaminating. So the assumption is the disease is hopefully gone at that point. The crop's gone, you put the chemical on, hopefully the disease isn't there. That's day 0 in your 12-month journey to release. 2 weeks fallow, plant the crops, and then we sample those crops every month and they can be sold. And we've got a business in this cycle now. So that's got 3 glass houses that are now being sampled and sold onto the markets that'll accept it. Not every interstate market has taken the fruit yet, but it's moving. I have to say that if the virus is detected anywhere along this time frame, unfortunately, we go back to here and we have to destroy the crop again, site disinfection. So we're hopeful that once we can get moving on this program, especially if we do this really well, we can keep moving for 12 months and move to the point where we can have proof of freedom. Once every glass house on a property has been through that stage, we can say the property's clean and doesn't have the disease. We can say we can remove quarantine arrangements. And once all 3 properties have been through that, we can say we've done it. So we're somewhere here at the moment. There's one site we're still disinfecting, but the rest are up in this zone. So I think we can see some progress towards eradication. Victoria are still back in that decontamination phase. They've got a big property over there that they're dealing with. So they're going through what we call DDD, destruction, disposal and decontamination at the moment. And we are still sampling the seed lines. We need to make sure that connection was how they got the disease. It seems obvious. It seems that's how they got it, but we have to do due diligence and test to make sure it is the same disease. So we're doing that work. As I said, we're decontaminating the site where that came from, and a summary of all this, even though we can't get the full 60-page document online, there's some confidential information in there, a summary of this. It says it's now available on the website, so that will hopefully, if it's not up, they're up very soon. Just got a couple more before we go to questions. I'll just slip over these quickly. I shouldn't, but we do focus on the impacts, and we should, because there's things that have particularly happened with market access and sampling that we've had to resolve. But some of the key milestones is, look, we have been able to stop this disease from spreading. It's still only limited to 3 properties, so that's great, because this disease does cause impact if you have it. So we've managed to stop that. We've kept markets open for New South Wales, Northern Territory, Victoria and Tasmania. We'd rather not have to sample to go to Western Australia and Queensland, but at least we've got trade moving again there now under a sampling program. We've got our new testing laboratory to help with that. And importantly, we've got that national response plan, which gives us a pathway out. So we've got to, I think, acknowledge some of those key milestones. They're really important with getting people through to the end. Our current focus is still on sampling certified produce from the treated glasshouses. We're on that monthly sample, but also any market access samples that come in. We're still decontaminating 1 property. We're getting ready for March, May. We know there's a peak coming. Getting ready to do a really intensive sampling and diagnostic period. We'll hopefully have those private labs online to help with that surge. And one thing which is going to be really good, I think, is we are moving out of this phase where we've been in what we call in PIRSA an emergency response program, where every 2 weeks we have a new team come on and rotate through, because they're coming away from their normal job to come and help. And that's been great. We've had some really good people rotate through. But because we've got this 12-month program now funded nationally, we can actually get some people on and leave them there in the job permanently for those 12 months. So all of you get the same faces every day, which is great. We have some people who remember what happened 3 weeks ago. I mean, we have good handover, and the people who were there 3 weeks ago are just at the end of the phone, but we'll have some continuity across the program. So that's going to be great. We are employing some people now with that national cost share arrangement. So we've got some people who will be there day to day from now until the end. And still obviously responding to any industry concerns that come up. I think we've been over this. This is that expression of intent form. Please, if you are going to sell, or even if you think you might, go online. I think there's copies here, is there today? People can fill out the copy and take home a hard copy if they want as well. And then I'm going to talk about fruit fly. I will talk about fruit fly. I won't pause there because there might be questions about the whole lot. I'll do my best. We've got Jason and Lamara here who can help with fruit fly as well. I used to do a lot of fruit fly work, but I haven't been on for the last week or two. So obviously we've got 2 fruit fly outbreaks at the moment as well. We've got one at Salisbury, which is the 15k zone extends out to this area. So we've been in that now for quite a while. So that's not new news. But unfortunately, a few weeks ago, we had an outbreak at Glynde. And so what that has done is it's brought in some apple and pear growers in the Adelaide Hills within the 15k zone. So it's not any new news for Virginia when it comes to fruit fly, but that line, that yellow zone is still there, unfortunately. So I know a lot of you have been working under what's called CA33. I'm hoping that's working. I'm hoping people have got into a routine now of applying that. It's a matter of making an application to PIRSA, getting an audit, and then another audit, and then you can manage that on your own property. So I'm hoping that's working, but I'm happy to take some questions and some comments about that. And I guess the crossover with tomatoes is that Western Australia don't have fruit fly and they don't have this virus. So to get to Western Australia, you actually have to do 2 things. You have to get tested for tomato virus, and you might have to, or you will have to fumigate your fruit for fruit fly if you're in that 15k zone. With fruit fly, it's really only Western Australia and Tasmania and the rest of South Australia, because all that east coast already have fruit fly. The main treatments being used, this is this CA33 I was talking about. Most people are using that. We've got a radiation on there, but that's only available interstate at the moment. And there's the fumigation facility at Edinburgh that I know some people are using as well. I think just to finish, so that's what our map looks like. Unfortunately, this is the Salisbury North outbreak area that we've known about for a while. This is the Glynde one down to the south. And so we've got 2 zones that connect. And this has brought in some apple growers, as I said. I think most people would be aware about the different zones. We'd love them to be smaller than they are, but unfortunately that's a national trade arrangement. That's what's been agreed for trade. So even though you could make an argument that a fruit fly won't fly 15 kilometres, that's a long flight for a fruit fly, unfortunately that's the trade agreement. That's what's been agreed to do business with fruit fly. So we would love those yellow zones to be smaller, but if we were to do that, people wouldn't accept our produce and they would suggest that we're mixing zones that we shouldn't be. So that's a national protocol that we're applying when we put the 15k zone on. So before I go to questions, I'll just ask Lamar and Jason, is there anything fruit fly wise that I might have missed there that you want to add before we go to questions? Or?
No, I don't think so. I suppose the main point is there are two separate numbers for market access if you're inquiring about either fruit fly related market access questions or tomato virus questions as well. So just be conscious of that. I think Nick touched on the fact that the two yellow zones are separate outbreak areas, so you can't move from the far north to the very far south without being an accredited process.
All right, so what we might do is just see if there's any questions or comments, whether it be about tomatoes or fruit fly, and we'll do our best to address them, is there?
Once you get to the 12-month proof of freedom period, I assume the state then is declared completely free of the virus. Is that?
Yeah, so there'll be two steps. Like not all three properties will hit that on the same day. So as soon as a property hits that date, their quarantine order will be taken off and that property will be declared free of the virus. That property's clean. When the third property reaches it, the state will be declared clean.
Yeah, so that just automatically occurs. Yep.
Yeah, cool. I think in terms of trade, which is probably where you're heading.
No, it's about getting back to normality, I think.
Yeah.
Nick, you're at the coalface with negotiations. I guess the statewide freedom's one question, but I guess I don't know how you'd say it, the liberalisation or loosening up of some of these regulations. Is there any room to move with some of the states like Queensland and WA in terms of like moving from a market access coming out and testing to a CA arrangement or a self-certification arrangement?
Thanks, Jordan. I'll talk about what we're doing, and I just want to manage expectations. You've mentioned this to me as well. We don't want to promise anything, but I can tell you what we're trying. So there's two things happening with the market access sampling. One is we are trying to take it to a point where growers can write their own certificates, a CA arrangement. So we still come out and do the sampling. We give you a letter to say all the crops are clear, that under a CA, you don't need to ask us to come back every time you want to move fruit to write a certificate. You write your own. That's what we're doing with CA 33 and others at the moment. So we've drafted those. We've taken them to Western Australia and Queensland. They're not ready to accept them yet. That's their prerogative. But that's where we'd like to get to with the certification side of things. I've got to say where we really want to get to is to a point where we don't need to certify our produce. I think, as I said, we've got 13,000 samples now that show that this is, I think, well contained. So we have submitted what's called a formal area freedom claim. That's being considered right now, but I don't want to give the expectation that that will be accepted. It's for other states to be considering. I think it's a fairly solid claim. My own view is that it's a very solid claim, but that's up for Western Australia and Queensland to consider. If they were to accept that, then we wouldn't have to sample anything because they'd accept that the rest of South Australia doesn't have the disease. That's for them to consider. That's with them at the moment.
And when you say rest of South Australia, is that outside of the plains or within a certain distance?
The whole state.
Yeah, if you're not an IP.
That's right, yeah. So if the claim was accepted, any tomato grower who isn't on one of those three properties could do business with anyone. But as I said, I just want to manage expectations on that. Any other thoughts or things you're seeing that we need to see?
That's more for my understanding. So this 12-month plan apply regardless, even if the grower is not growing tomato at all, or leave the greenhouse fully empty.
Yes, so Fabio, that's right. What we've said is that once you've disinfected, we want 12 months, because we know the disease, if you've missed it in disinfection, which has happened overseas, it needs that time to be sure that the disease is gone. So even if you decide to fallow, we have to wait 12 months before we say the disease is actually gone.
So if it goes as everybody wish that in a 7-8 month time we can be, free of virus. Victoria would be 4 or 5 months behind SA, correct?
Yeah. So Victoria, I think, was the 14th of January. So the earliest date they could claim freedom would be the 14th of January 2026. And that's the last detection we've had. Yep.
Thank you.
Nationally. Thanks.
I have a question on the last crop I finished harvesting, and do I need to report to someone that the crop has been finished?
Do you need, sorry, I didn't hear that.
Like the crop has been tested and clear, and I tried to Queensland. I finished it. Do I need to report to the PERSA to end the crop or no?
No, you don't. So the question was around whether we have to do anything with that crop now it's finished. Report? No. We're only testing that crop so you can access Queensland. We're confident that crop doesn't have the disease. We've tested it. It's clean. So at the end of the crop cycle, you can do what you'd normally do with the crop. You don't need to tell us. But the next crop, if you want to send again, we'll have to sample again and get that certificate again.
Okay, so there's a protocol written for this whole virus, okay? And this is the first time the protocol has probably been tested. Do you think there'll be a possibility that the protocol might get reviewed in the future?
This is the testing and diagnostic protocol, or?
Yeah, or just the whole protocol that's in place.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to stir the pot or anything, I'm just curious. It's just a curiosity, yeah.
No, it's a good point.
Because you write a protocol and then it has to actually get tested one day, and that's happened now.
Yeah.
So is there any thought around maybe a review of the protocols?
Yeah, there will be. As a minimum, at the end, we will review the whole thing and say, did that work? What didn't work as well as it should, and what would be changed next time? Yeah. So that's written into the deed. Plant Health Australia will do that. But I'd like to think that if it's not, it's getting reviewed anyway. So if there's suggestions about something not working, there's nothing to stop us looking at that now. So,
I'm not making a suggestion, I'm just curious.
So but you're right, and that's almost like a safety net. That's an independent review from industry, or Plant Health Australia industry government, but they'll look at it without the PERSA lens. There might be something we might miss. So that happens at the end.
There is a protocol, but it's almost like it's a series of decisions. I think they know how to deal with a disease, but it ultimately comes down to 6 or 7 chief plant health officers agreeing. So a lot of the decisions are time sensitive about the particular issue they're dealing with. A lot of other factors come in, how concerned industry is. There's political overlays. There's a whole lot of stuff that goes into it, I think. So, Nick and I always, from an industry point of view, always have this discussion about preparedness. And I think the discussion I've seen over 10 years is when we had CGMVV, which cucumber green mottle mosaic virus, I think it took about 24 months, I think, to come to a resolution about how we were dealing with it and trade. TPP was 18 months. This one was down to about 4 to 6 when it was sort of resolved. So the system's imperfect. There's a lot of. I think even if you had something on paper, I think even if it was coming the other way, Nick, industry and you would probably demand to review it in the context of the current situation. So when these issues happen, you can have something written down how we've dealt with something in the past, but ultimately, each response is kind of different, is what I'm trying to articulate, I guess. So I think there are some things that I can think of to improve the process. I think we need to look at face-to-face meetings at the early stages, because I think it's quite easy for people to put their head in the sand, and when you don't see a business burning and losing money and tomatoes being dumped, we were feeling it in SA, but other states, without pointing fingers, perhaps weren't operating at the same tempo that we were. So I think there's things we can do, but having a bunch of set protocols on the table, that's good. But even if we had one for tomato virus, I think you'd find that once it came and the chief plant health officers were reviewing the response, it would still take, I think you're talking at least a couple of months. Would that be fair, Nick?
Yeah, I think it's a good point. Each one is different, but obviously you've got a template to work from, but it would be different again. All right, well, thank you all for coming out. I know it's midweek. There's always other competing demands, so thanks for coming out. We really appreciate it. Please hang around. There were a few of us here if you want to talk one-on-one. Thanks very much.